What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're taking a look at Assassin's Creed Shadows here on the ROG Ally X. And, well, this game has forced ray tracing currently, a lot like Indiana Jones did, which is bringing performance down lower than I originally thought it would be for all the handhelds. But it's pretty much been playable from the Steam Deck to the Claw 8 to the Legion Go and now the Ally X. So we'll take a look at some different settings here and what it's going to take to get you there, whether you're wanting to use frame generation or lower resolution or settings or what the case might be. Now, as far as settings, we are mostly going to use 900p when we get to it, but we're going to take a look at 1080 and 720. We're going to use AMD FSR balanced in the video. You could use quality or performance. We're definitely going to get into some frame generation. You can't turn off the ray tracing features, but I do have diffuse hideout only, which helps a bit. And we'll tick up a couple of settings later, but right now we're keeping things pretty much at low just because of how heavy it is on the GPU to really try to run the game to begin with. So let's jump into the in-game benchmark real quick just to give us a general idea. Real-world performance is a little bit different, but at least you can see here something consistent. And you can see 720p at the top and 1080p at the bottom, running that low preset with FSR on balanced, with and without frame gen. And of course, the higher your base FPS, the better frame gen is going to work, and the more FPS you'll get from that. Even though they typically recommend 60 FPS when using frame gen, it works fine in games like this with the lower FPS. And to be honest with you, it actually feels better, in my opinion, having frame gen on and running this at something closer to 900p, which we are going to get into looking at. But 1080p really isn't the best way to go if you're really wanting to smooth things out and keep things up a little bit. I think 720p if you want to go without frame generation, and 900p with FSR as well if you want to use frame generation. So for the settings I kind of settled on for now, 900p, keeping FSR on balance, again adjust that how you want, and frame generation on using the FSR version. And again, with the settings, we're going to stick with that low preset, diffuse only for hideout, but I'll tick up the texture streaming pool to medium, and also we'll come down to the virtual textures here, and we'll just put those on medium. It's just a small help, but it doesn't impact my performance and seems to work out fine. But if I start taking too many other things up, we do start losing FPS, which is going to make a big deal, especially if we're getting into frame gen. But these settings for the 900p I think work out pretty well. They look pretty decent on the device, and everything feels pretty good this way. Again, frame generation and everything in this game, for me, in my opinion, feels great, and that's not always the case in all the games with frame gen. Now, with frame gen turned off at that 900p custom low medium settings here, you can see that we mostly can hold 30, but there are a lot of areas where we're going to dip into the 20s, especially if you get more NPCs, combat, weather effects, and things like that. So if you want to run without frame generation at all, I recommend more using 720p with balanced or quality FSR. You could do 900p with maybe performance or ultra performance, but it does get to looking pretty sketchy. I'd rather upscale a little bit less on a lower resolution. But ultimately, if that's the way you want to run things, you could do that. As far as input latency, again, for me, going from either just running without frame gen or with frame generation, there really isn't much of any perceived difference in input latency, even with the lower base FPS. So turning FSR's frame generation back on here and leaving everything else the same in kind of the same area, you'll see now we'll be more up in the 50s. And a lot of times frame generation or AFMF or any of the other stuff can add more input latency, especially for a game like this. But quite honestly, again, I really don't notice much difference in this game, and honestly it just looks better and feels better, in my opinion, using the frame gen. But if you don't want to use frame generation, maybe go with 720p and play through that way. But that's pretty much it for how things are running here. The ray tracing having to be on is definitely keeping the performance a bit lower, but I'm going to leave you guys with some more gameplay to check out here. You can see how it's running with these settings. As always, thanks a lot for coming and check out the video. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.
Regret challenging me. Shinobi!